Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Kevin Coyne from Austin, Texas. Welcome to the Venture Outfitter Weekly. We're broadcasting from Austin, Texas. Want to welcome you. Today, we're going to hear from one of our long-term members, Chris Nielsen. He was in Venture Forth #2. It actually wasn't even called Venture Forth at the time. It was still called Entrepreneur to Employee to Entrepreneur. So way old, long-term history with the tech range, but I want to welcome you. Thanks for joining us today on the Venture Outfitter. We'll just hop in really quickly to what's happening around the tech ranch and some of the different things that are happening. Thank you to DualWorks, Linda Blackman and her team at DualWorks for making it possible they are a sponsor of this studio that we're operating from or broadcasting from. They're also really great about helping entrepreneurs that need special configurations of whether it's like the mailbox for someone that's international that needs that international point of presence, all the way up to very inexpensive, accessible co-working to full-time, full closed-door offices here. So thank you, Linda, and your team. Coming soon, what's happening around the tech ranch? Next week, we're going to have what we're calling an all swim. What is an all swim? Well, this is my way of saying I'd like to have this one. We have this community segment, a lot of different entrepreneurs that are in the education space. And there's enough mass now, especially as we deploy the community software, that I just want to hear from a bunch of them. And so they're going to be organizing their own program. I'll open up the conversation, but we'll hear from, I think, at least 4 different teams during that time about what's happening with EdTech. And all swim just means this was when you were at the pool back in middle school, and they could say, everyone can swim now. So that's part of the idea of the notion with all swim. Melvin, is there anything you want to say more about what's going to happen during that time?
Thanks, Kevin. We're really, really excited. A lot of people doing some work in the background. So, everybody is invited to be there and join in. It's not just someone talking, but everybody jump in.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Melvin. Looking forward to that program. And then due to bureaucracy, and everyone that knows me knows how I loathe, probably I could come up with a stronger word. I loathe bureaucracy. My trip to Uzbekistan has been delayed, and we're not sure exactly. And it's because someone didn't fill out a piece of paper, but it's not us. Usually it'd be me for the last person to do paper, but Jello's got me covered from that standpoint. So I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen. I think that we're going to be doing the October 13th VO Weekly will be then. The other thing I'm hoping is, since we do have 2 fellows that are here we have a fellows program that we have 2 Uzbeks that are actually going to be presenting. We heard from them last time during this time. More than likely, before I go, we'll do the program that they're going to have before that. So that should be pretty interesting. I'm looking forward to it. There's a lot to discover about that country as I've gotten to learn more about it. Everything from things like, I think we mentioned last time, this is where algebra comes from. So the idea of like the knowledge base is interesting to see what that part of the world has to offer. So deep breath before a serious note. Quote of the week. Never think that war, no matter how necessary, nor how justified, is not a crime. Ernest Hemingway in 1946 said this. When he was 18 years old, he volunteered to be an ambulance driver at World War I. And so, right at the end of World War II is when he actually said this quote. And the reason I'm actually taking a moment to punctuate this is, you probably heard there's announced that President Putin is calling in another 300,000 troops for deploying into Ukraine. And I don't think that anyone who loves peace actually cannot say something about this and not do something about it. And so we already know that the US government is providing support for the Ukraine and stuff like that. And part of what I'm going to say is, I know that one of the reasons that there's been some changes on some of the flights and stuff like that is right now it sounds like that in Moscow and across Russia, there is this mass exodus of Russians that are saying, hey, we don't want any part of this. It's not the, it's not the Russian people that the problem is, it's the Russian government that is the problem with this war. And when I actually say this, sometimes people are like, well, what about you, American? I don't think that we should be going to war at all, whether it's an American war or a Russian war or anything like that. And I think that there's something to our dialogue that we need to start bringing. And I'm not going to say that I'm a pacifist, because I'm not. I do believe in nonviolence versus violence. Pacifism, I don't agree with, because like when you hear about what happened in World War II and, with the Nazis rolling out and killing so many Jews and the Holocaust, you cannot not do something about that. And so specifically what I will personally announce is just to say that, if some of our Russian colleagues need support in landing into other places, as what a 250,000 Russians had already moved to Armenia, to escape what they saw as unjust. The problem that we have is not with the Russian people, it's with the Russian government. And we need to actually really forcefully say this idea that war is not the answer, especially in a world where to continue to, have war be a feature, it's just long term, it's just not sustainable, period. Nor is it just. Okay, well, so that's what I have to say about that. There will be some other things that are happening. I know that we have some of our Russian entrepreneurs have actually already taken advantage of leaving. And I got to know from Budapest earlier today, one of my friends was just in Ukraine and came back through Hungary and was, asking some questions about where to go in Budapest to connect with some of our entrepreneurs. We have, as some of you know, we actually have, the Texas-Hungary Venture Bridge that got launched in November this last year. When I was there, one of the places that I went to that I think is important to share some of the imagery from, but we'll do this in a later point, is I went to the House of Terror, where it talked about what the Nazis and then the Soviets did in that place, and we should say something about it. We should say something about it. We need to make this more visible, because it's, the idea that this war in Ukraine is going to continue to go, and wars in other parts of the world as well. It's not just about Europe or continental Europe. It's about any place in the world. But never think that that's okay. We need to get out of the idea that there's any justice.
Venture out.
Okay, I don't know if someone was trying to say something, but if you want to have something to add, you're always welcome to raise your hand, and then I'd like to usher you in. So thank you for being here. All right, well, so on good news, one of our entrepreneurs, this is Isabel. Isabel is an entrepreneur that has a company called EcoClean based out of Costa Rica. She just won an award through the data program that we are supporting. We have a number of different entrepreneurs from around the world that we're working with. I think I've mentioned to you that right now, active engagements, we have 10 entrepreneurs or 10 companies based out of Japan all the way to, Japan and Australia, the long way. And it's been pretty interesting to get to work with these entrepreneurs that are from Central America. When I say Central America, I don't just mean Mexico, because everyone knows that we've done quite a lot of different work with companies in Mexico. And in this case, it's pretty cool to see what they're doing. They have a set of cleaners that replace toxic cleaners, like in your home, with alternatives. And they were being recognized by Central Prime, which is like the Central American. The YPE stands for is saying for small to medium sized businesses, is part of what those focus on. And so it's been pretty cool to do it. Congratulations to Isabel. At some point, we're going to have Isabel and several of the other companies speaking here. so that we can actually, interact with them and hear a little bit more about these companies. But it is got a good amount of, they got a good amount of coverage and small scholarship that went along with this award that happened. So it's pretty cool to see. Last week, we mentioned the new website, the new community website, the Tech Ranch community. Several of you all have hopped onto it. I noticed that a lot of you haven't put your profile pictures yet, which is why there's little colorful boxes. Make sure you put profile pictures here. If you haven't gotten an early alpha and you're in the family of companies, which most of the people that are here in the studio audience, as an example, are in the family. If you haven't done that yet and you want to get onto it, add yourself to the form that's in that QR code, and we'll get you onto it, because we're doing the alpha rollout is only to family members, and then we'll do a larger rollout from there. So please do join us and things like that. That would be great to have you on that. And especially with the EdTech community kind of really taking off, we'll have different areas, discussion areas that you can actually focus on. You can see all in a different graphic at a different time. I'll go ahead and share all the different discussion areas that are going to be there. This is going to replace our Slack channels. Part of it is Slack just took their long-term policy of accounts and they shifted it. So we're shifting away from Slack. We're shifting away from Mighty Networks. I'm really pleased with how the Circle community is the company's name that we're using. Their product is called Circle.so. In fact, several of y'all are actually deploying it as well. As an example, Stephen, who you see here, is deploying the Circle community for his community as well. Part of what we'll do is, if you are doing something along those lines, we also have a special area of network builders that you can be a part of as well. So switching gears and getting ready for Chris to join us. Every week, or at least twice a month, we have a monthly newsletter. I think she actually gets our employee Paloma gets this out twice a month, even though she calls it monthly. Venture Connections is another company that myself, Chris, who we're just about to hear from, and Enrique Dunhe actually started a supply chain response. That is, how do we get Mexico involved in the supply chain shift that's happening from away from China into the Americas, and especially focused around Mexico, but it has included companies all the way to Hungary. So pretty interesting about how the opportunities are as this supply chains shift. What we'll do is, if you're interested in getting onto that newsletter, go to the website. There's a QR code right there, or ventureconnections.info, and you can join us. And really, I know that I go through all those announcements as quickly as possible, because really, you're here today to hear from our expert. And it's interesting. Chris has two things to offer at least two things. He's been a long-term tech rancher, and he's got quite a lot of scar tissue for going to the path of being a pioneer in the electrification of mobility. He focused on microtransit. What is that? He'll tell us some story about what is microtransit, how did he come up with the idea. He also has a lot of scar tissue to share about what it took to build. He built the largest fleet of electric vehicles outside of the U.S. government for microtransit in the world, and it's pretty interesting about what he's done. And it's been big and small and all sorts of stuff because of COVID and all that. He's also doing some pretty interesting experiments with the U.S. Department of Energy on deploying new technologies and new systems for figuring out what does transit look like into the future. And so he's a good friend as well, a drinking buddy as well. Happy to have him here. Chris, join us. And I know you're going to share some slides as well, but I'd like to make sure that we actually get a chance to hear from you. Welcome. You're on mute, by the way, so make sure you come off of mute and tell us hello.
Hey, well, happy to be here. Good morning, everybody. So I met Kevin way back in 2011, I believe. And that's whenever I had just started my company, what would become Electricab later on, as it is today. So just a brief synopsis, I was a concierge at the Omni Hotel downtown. And part of my job was to get people rides for short distances. And I discovered very quickly that taxi cabs just didn't want to do it. Couldn't understand it until I finally talked to a taxi driver, and he explained to me their fee structure is based on time and distance, and they don't want to lose their place in the queue for a $3 ride. So what would happen every day is I would try to get somebody a taxi ride to take them 6 or 7 blocks, and the taxi driver outside would just stand there flat-footed and say no. So guess who got yelled at? This guy. I got yelled at every day. And I remember just being outside, just fuming one time because I've been yelled at like twice in a row. And I'm like, I don't work for Yellow Cab. Why is everybody yelling at me? And I saw a City of Austin golf cart drive down the street with a license plate. And I just thought, oh my God, that's the answer right there. Went home, Googled the laws. The laws were kind of ambiguous, but it was clear that they were street legal. The city disagreed on that, but I'll get to that in a second. So I quit my job, cashed in my 401k. This is before I had a wife and kids, and started up. The first weekend we went out, I drove myself and I made $700 in one night. Like, okay, all right, maybe this will work. Not too long after that, we started running into problems with the city because there was no regulations around electric low-speed vehicles. They didn't have any permit available for it. They didn't have any regulations at all. And I was mistaken in thinking that this is America and you can just do what you want. But so I wound up butting heads with the city. They kept promising to create an ordinance for us, but I was constantly chasing a moving target. I wound up going to court 227 times. We won all but 3. But, you know, we just kept winning in court, but then we had to keep going back for the same thing over and over again because there's really no limit on it. They don't really set case statute on Class Cs. It got so bad that whenever I was going through security at the municipal courthouse, I remember the security guard pulling me aside and saying, hey, man, just flash your bar card. You don't need to go through the metal detector. I'm like, I'm a defendant. And just the way he looked at me was like, what? But I mean, all that's over with. What ultimately happened is I joined Tech Ranch because I was just desperate. I had no idea what to do. And then while I was in Tech Ranch, a former city council member had her ordinance on the agenda and she just completely shot it down. And then I was just out of business. So I dropped out of Tech Ranch, just like college and everything else. But I dropped out and decided to do this. I found one.
That's funny. So part of there's a story that maybe not is about electrification of mobility, but the thing that I really always admired about Chris was the persistence of, like, I mean, these regulations really had to be taken on. And yeah, it's quite interesting about how difficult that can be to consistently over and over and over have to take on, including running his own a political campaign, running for office, and going against some of the other politicians that were in there. It's quite a story of resilience about being the pioneer that you have been, Chris.
Oh, I'd had that much fun since 7th grade, honestly. That was a lot of fun, but I didn't actually want to be on the city council. I don't know anybody who'd actually want that job, but what I wanted to do was for City Hall to stop ignoring us. And keep in mind, this is before Uber. This is while the taxi lobby still had teeth, and before Uber kicked them in. But they were just ignoring us for years. And finally, after I ran and a certain council member was not reelected, the incoming council member sponsored our ordinance, and then I left everybody at City Hall alone. Just interesting side note is one of the reasons that they kept pulling it from the agenda is taxi drivers kept showing up and protesting at City Hall. I don't know if you guys remember, but October 7th, 2011 is when Occupy Austin started. That's the same day our ordinance passed. It's my fault that they went to City Hall. I'm sorry about that, guys. None of us knew what we were getting into in the beginning, but originally they wanted to go to the Capitol, and I created a survey online saying, let's go to City Hall. The legislature's not in session. And next thing you know, we had 10,000 protesters at City Hall. So whenever the taxi drivers showed up to protest, they were drowned out. I've come to find out later on, way later on, that city council had already been briefed on this. Like APD was all over this. Their intel was everywhere. They knew it was me that did that. So I thought I was kind of flying under the radar, but no, they knew exactly what was going on. I apologize for Occupy. None of us knew what it was when it started, but it served a purpose for me in the very beginning. But so fast forward a few years.
Let me put some words on that, because I'd like to make sure that the story is really interesting. To think the thing that shows, one of the things that you can always look at doing is guerrilla marketing capabilities, right? Guerrilla marketing. What I hear about what Chris just did was actually doing guerrilla marketing tactics. So part of what you should look at is how is it you can actually, especially to advance something important. This is an important initiative. Transit is important in a city's history, and obviously, just like Uber had to take on, but Uber had the big bucks to actually spend on massive marketing campaigns. Chris had Chris and his group of merry men around. It's like it was a much smaller type of operation, but still was able to cut through that. So that, I think, is an interesting nuance about how to leverage guerrilla marketing capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, we were on TV probably about twice a week for a good period of time there. I mean, to this day in 2022, I've never spent $1 on marketing, but that's just me. I just know how to get attention. I've been a troublemaker my whole life. But so the city finally left us alone. We got our permits, and then I stopped being on TV because there's nothing newsworthy about a business just operating. It's like, next, an electric cab, nothing's going on. Back to you. Yeah, it's just not going to work. But so we started using different vehicles, highly upgraded vehicles, which I'm about to show you whenever I start sharing the screen. And am I allowed to share, Kevin?
Yeah, go right ahead. Go right ahead. I'll come off of Spotlight and go right ahead. Please do.
All right. I'm having to allow Zoom to do this. Hold on, I'm sorry.
No worries. Well, while we're doing that, a part of what I'll also say as well for the people that are listening in about electrification of mobility, part of what's happening now that now that we've really built most of the a good portion of the network around what's happening around Tech Ranch, we do have interactions that are happening between, say, Chris's company and one of our companies out of Japan that has an advanced battery technology. Part of what I would like to start having you guys see is how these different startups can go to market together and take on activities together. Okay, with that, go right back to it, Chris. It's all yours.
All right. So what I founded then eventually became electric-cab North America. Like Kevin said, we were the largest fleet operator of electric low-speed vehicles in the United States outside of the government pre-COVID. We're not there. There's a couple bigger companies than us now, but that's only because I don't have a trust fund, but I'm catching up quickly. We're entirely bootstrapped. We've never taken on any angel investors or institutional capital. This is 100% funded through fairs and advertising. And during the pandemic, we actually lost our entire fleet because we were everything was rented from United Rentals. And whenever we stopped renting them, well, United Rentals sold them to our competitors. And I was sitting here thinking, well, I guess I'm out of business. Well, not so fast. We're back in action. We just slowly started buying more vehicles. Actually, I have 3 being delivered today. Kevin can tell you I'm a halfway decent negotiator. So these are the type of vehicles we use. They're called electric low-speed vehicles. Think of them like a golf cart from the future on steroids. They're fully street legal. They're registered and insured and inspected and all that good stuff. But what we use them for is a microtransit platform. Now, what's microtransit? That's any trip under 3 miles. It's any trip that just doesn't make sense for a taxi or an Uber or a bus to do. We found a very large mobility desert in downtown Austin, and turns out every city has this. Right now, we're operating under a Department of Energy grant out in Bastrop, Texas, under the Rural Mobility Program. That's how you can tell a real Texan is how we say rural. We've been operating out there since December of 2020. And that is like straight in the middle of Trumplandia. They were not a fan of electric vehicles in the very beginning. Now they love us. Our grant is coming to an end at the end of November, and we're actually going to renew the contract. Now the city's going to fund it. As of 2 weeks ago, we broke 10,000 riders in a town of 9,000 people. Like, people are using us as their daily commute. So adoption is in cities, it's small towns, it's pretty much anywhere. Just think of it like a horizontal elevator. That's probably the best way to look at it. So what we do is we connect people to and from mass transportation providers. In a previous grant we had, we were connecting people to light rail at the Domain, also at Mueller, and then downtown Austin. Whenever we did that program, we were competing head-to-head with Chariot. That was Ford's microtransit solution. We went head-to-head with them, and a $65 million company, after 1 year, moved about 900 people in downtown Austin. eCab, which is, well, let's just say not a $65 million company, we moved 46,000 people in the same time period. And I was wondering why. Like, Chariot had much better technology. I mean, they definitely had tight branding, and they had freaking Ford behind them. I thought I was about to get blown out of the water. And I couldn't understand why until my wife took one look at a Chariot van and said, "Oh my God, I would never get in that." That's something I never would have thought of. I mean, I'm a dude that's 6'5". I never worry about safety, but, well, as we were quick to learn, most of our ridership is female, and they do think about safety quite a bit. And if you look at our type of vehicles here, nobody's going to kidnap you in a golf cart. It's just not going to happen. So I think that's why we have such high adoption. It's not just the utility, but they're just fun to ride at the same time. Well, this is an old deck. We've actually got 14 years of fleet management experience. Sorry about that. So this is the type of vehicle that we have. It's basically just a slowed down car. They're run with lithium iron phosphate batteries that we put in ourselves, that didn't come stock from the OEM. But it's a DOT rated vehicle. It's been crash tested. And I'm happy to say at 14 years, we've never had a real injury, not once. Our safety record's immaculate. What we pivoted towards in 2015 is starting to do circulators, where we get hired by either a downtown alliance, a property development company, or a federal grant. And then we just create an urban circulator where we connect people to mass transit, to parking that's a little bit far out, and just hotels to restaurants and bars. I mean, there's a massive market there, and we have a in-house developed app. But even though we don't really use it downtown, it's because our vehicles are so unique. We don't really need it. This is our real moneymaker, though. In the very beginning, with some of our circulator clients, they kept wanting to know ridership data. They want to know how many passengers, and we're trying to come up with ways of counting it. And then finally, I just had a lot of coffee and sat down and just created this dashboard where we collect every piece of data that we can possibly do outside of personally identifiable information. So whenever I say that we do that, we do a mixture of sensors and old school AI. Old school AI meaning actual intelligence. You use your brain box. Our drivers are trained to have a script of non-invasive questions, but in that conversation that they're having, that's what populates this dashboard. Like some of it is soft data, with the estimated age or the gender identity, but like the ADA, that's a very valuable one. What day, what time. We also generate heat maps on where the rides are originating and where they're going. This is the stuff that the Department of Energy just loves. And something that we just found out about the current grant that we're on is there were 5 other recipients of the same grant. And I found this out a couple of weeks ago. We have moved more passengers than all of the other recipients combined. We're not really big on planning and modeling. We're really big on just deploying and figuring it out from there. These are the places that we've operated in: Austin, Dallas, Arizona, Missouri, Bastrop, and as of the 24th of next month, we'll be starting in San Marcos, Texas. So like one example, here's the Bastrop one I was talking about. We're doing about 370 passengers a week, and that's just with one vehicle in operation. There's a wait time. They are never bored. They're constantly moving. Even the mayor rides with us all the time. But what we do is we provide the dashboard that I showed you a slide before. We provide that to the city, so they're able to get a real time, something that updates every 3 seconds, snapshot on what's going on downtown. And that's from Chandler. We also operated in Chandler, Arizona, side by side with Waymo. That stopped because of the pandemic, and now we're currently in negotiations with their city purchasing department to get it started back up again. But as you can see, we moved 38,332 passengers in 2 years. I mean, there's high adoption on these. This is why I kept fighting the city rather than going off and getting a real job. It's you can't really argue with instant customer adoption. So our economics is pretty simple. We just get hired out for $75 to $85 an hour to be a circulator service, and we give them the data analytics. We have route optimization. We can track commuting patterns. We can also come up with data or collect data points that aren't very obvious. Like if you want to know who works where, what the driver does is they just pay attention to work badges and they input that data as well. The way that passengers get counted is everybody has seatbelt sensors in their car. That really annoying beep sound that you get whenever the seatbelt isn't closed. We have that on all of our seatbelts, and that's how we count them. If the seatbelt is closed for more than 10 seconds, it counts as a passenger. So the benefits to this is like, I'm just going to use San Marcos as an example. In San Marcos, they're running into a problem in their downtown where all of their employees that work downtown would also park downtown. So then the people who would actually want to go to the venues would have to park in outlying areas. And so what they're doing is they're switching it around. Now employees will start parking in 3 satellite parking lots, and we'll just be moving people in and out of the downtown town square to the parking. So that's going to open up parking spaces for the actual customers. But doing this does drive economic development. The city of Bastrop has noticed upticks in their sales tax whenever we're operating, and that's not a coincidence. Oh, that was the last slide. So, all right, I'll stop sharing. And basically, this is something we've been doing for 14 years, mainly because I'm totally unemployable. I don't want to get a job. I can't do it. I barely work with Kevin sometimes. But I mean, I wouldn't do anything else. And I mean, I'm going to be in Washington, D.C. next week speaking with someone from the White House Innovation Department on a panel at the Smart Cities Conference. And I just think it's funny whenever people say smart city and then me in the same sentence, but I'll go with it.
Well, you know what? Let's point that out. I mean, it's interesting because at the base part of what everyone sees is they say, "Oh, wait, that's a golf cart." But what's really interesting is look at the different things that have happened. Right? You've got the guerrilla marketing style to drive a cultural engagement around things, right? That is actually a sophisticated way of doing things. You had to shape regulations through guerrilla marketing tactics. Then on top of that, the technology is not the actual, well, I mean, you learn some stuff about lithium iron versus lithium ion type of batteries, and there's a hard story about that too. So there is this idea of figuring out technology, then capturing that type of data analytics. That's actually fairly sophisticated, because we're talking about how is it that we shift the cultural frame. I mean, it's no small feat to actually get people thinking of things in a different way, right? It's like, let's conserve our parking for the people who are going to come in and spend spend money on that restaurant or that, whatever it might be. San Marcos is a beautiful little city. It's got a beautiful downtown. And the problem with it is, like you said, it grew up as kind of a sleepy college town that's now going big time. And okay, how do you keep that character without just destroying it with parking lots and stuff like that? You're doing that, right? So that's actually fairly sophisticated. Now, that being said, Chris does come across as kind of just like, pretty easy going. Talk a little bit more about the technologies. You've done other technology experiments. You've experimented a lot. And I don't think that comes across in some of the things. This is why you're getting invited to smart city conferences and flown around the world to be able to talk about this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I can get into that. So we have our CTO, David Brummer. He's a former DARPA guy. He created our self-driving electric cab. And I hate to burst everyone's bubble, but the robo-taxis, those are not coming anytime soon. I just don't care what anyone has to say about it. It's not feasible yet. And the reason for that is because cities need to be a lot more connected than they are right now. So that's where our niche is basically we're a mobile power supply. And we can connect all of these really cool smart city doohickeys that all communicate with each other. But we've worked with NXP, we've worked with Siemens, also with Velodyne, and what's the third one? Qualcomm. And what we do is we put their devices on our vehicles, and we're able to talk to street lights. We're able to communicate to see if there's construction up ahead or anything like that. The self-driving aspect that we are going to be targeting is the real problem with autonomy is not necessarily the technology, it's us. It's the stupid human factor. And especially with scooters and people jaywalking. I don't know if you've ever driven downtown Austin at nighttime, but people will walk right out in the middle of the street and look at you like you're crazy. And until we figure out how to fix that, it's just not going to happen. But that being said, where autonomy does make sense is areas where people know that they have to behave, such as a work campus or an airport. People are being watched. They know that they can't just get drunk and throw beer cans out the window and expect to keep getting rides. So what we're doing right now is we really focus on the smaller towns. This is something that popped up during the pandemic. I never would have thought about this before, but smaller towns are also having big transportation problems because there's not enough of a market to support a taxi company or a ride sharing company. If you go out to Bastrop, you're not getting an Uber. Nobody's driving Uber out there. So what happens is you have all of these people out there that are completely stuck. Whenever you don't have a car, you're SOL in small town Texas. So what we've been able to do is really improve the quality of some people's lives, frankly.
It's interesting too, because I mean, you're bringing lifeblood into the community center there, right? I mean, if you can't get around or you can't easily get a parking space, you're just going to come back to Austin, right? Whereas Bastrop and San Marcos both have taken advantage of the proximity to Austin, but then made it really interesting that, it's like, if I can get around, so yeah, I'll go, I might take a date to go over there and like, let's go to this restaurant and the next, and you're enabling that. You're enabling the small town, small business that would get largely ignored otherwise.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And it's these smaller towns. It costs a lot of money to start up a transit agency. We're talking dozens of millions of dollars just to get started. We're very different. We operate very lean. We're very nimble. So we're able to do this at a price point of about $200,000 a year per vehicle. And that's budget dust whenever it comes to a city. I don't know if people know what municipal spending looks like, but a stoplight costs $250,000 whenever you aggregate the total cost. So it's really not that big of a deal. And what we do is we get the buy-in from the city, also from the Chamber of Commerce, from the tourism department and the economic development department. As long as we can get all of them to play together nicely, we can get a very good service. Moving forward, we're targeting everything up and down the SH-130 corridor. There's a massive IRA money that's going to be going in that direction, and we're going to be utilizing that to bring microtransit to a lot more communities like Lockhart, Luling, Waco, Temple, Buda, Kyle, pretty much anything up and down I-35. And considering I'm a local Lockhart boy, like I'm actually from here, it's kind of weird, but this is the area that I really want to hit. And I never would have thought about the small towns until the pandemic hit. But just looking at how fiercely loyal our ridership is, I mean, there's a petition going around Bastrop right now just to make sure that they keep the service after Thanksgiving. Little do they know we are going to do it, but I'm not going to stop them from doing the petition. But
and this is not one of your guerrilla marketing activities, which is surprising, but that's good. That's good.
I didn't do that.
Yeah, no. Well, I think it always is interesting. I've learned a lot from Chris just because I'm like, wait, he did what? Well, so we have a few people in the studio audience. One of them is an architect who's rebuilding cities and stuff like that. He raised his hand a while ago, and I want to go ahead and invite him into the conversation real quick too. Jorge, you mentioned you raised your hand. I'm just wondering if you'd like to, you have a question or a statement or just
sure.
join us.
Thanks, Kevin, and hi, Chris, and congratulations for what we're doing. You are years ahead. Thank you for that. My question was about if you have already figured out if in the Inflation Reduction Act, is there any incentive for buildings regarding electric mobility, like subsidizing charging stations or stuff like that? Have you heard anything about that?
Yes, I have. And before I answer that, I'm going to make a lot of people mad. We don't use charging stations. I don't touch them. I never want to touch charging stations. We do all of this in-house. Like that's a big logical fallacy that's going out right now, is that people have range anxiety. But if you talk to anyone, do we have any Tesla drivers in the audience right now? Or just ask them who has a Tesla, ask them where they charge. And I'd be willing to bet all the dollars in my wallet that they charge at home, because you just don't need to in intra-city travel. That being said, in the Inflation Reduction Act, there is a lot of money being put in towards electrical infrastructure. Also, there's entire residential developments that are going in Travis County and also out in Bastrop, where the requirement to buy or rent a house in these communities is you have to have an electric car. You cannot have a internal combustion engine and buy the vehicle. And that's just a very small part of it. I've been pestering the heck out of Lloyd Doggett's office to make sure that low-speed vehicles get included in the $7,500 tax credit that you get for purchasing electric vehicles. There's some ambiguity right now in the way that the language is there. So hopefully, we were sending a distinguished colleague letters over, and that's Congress speak for someone else is sponsoring this. Will you please help? So hopefully we can get that through and get some clarity on what the subsidies are for low-speed electric vehicles. But this is absolutely the future. Electric vehicle companies aren't doing that well today in the stock market, but that's just a buying opportunity, guys. You just got to be patient. But there's a lot coming through the pipeline as far as grants from the DOE, DOT, and surprisingly enough, I just saw one the other day through the USDA. But it's there, and I'm going to go after it. But the Inflation Reduction Act is going to be a real catalyst for us.
Let me actually interject real quick. So the other thing I can tell our audience about is Jorge's background is he's an architect that does a lot. In fact, I won't try to position you the right way. Jorge, you should do the same and just tell us just like, a little bit about what you're doing. But then the question I have for you is, what are the other changes in our cities that we're seeing that might end up being a conversation starter among our community about how we can, like I can actually see it when you raised your hand a while ago, I'm like, I can actually see how you and Chris have crossover, even though you're dealing with architecture and he's dealing with microtransit, right? It'd be interesting to see what's the deeper question that you might have, Jorge, that then ends up creating interaction among y'all after this.
Well, you know, they're starting to allow new developments with no parking. Like that's becoming a thing in Texas. Like if you build a skyscraper, there is no parking requirement anymore.
Yeah.
You have X amount of spots per unit, and that's going away.
Jorge, what do you think about it as well? Tell us about your background.
Sure, thank you, Kevin. Well, we are a sustainability consultancy. We have projects mostly in Mexico, but also in the south of Texas and many other parts of Latin America. And we are in a promotion of the transformation of existing obsolete office buildings into housing buildings. And part of that, we think that is going to be a big support, the Inflation Reduction Act, regarding electric mobility and many other aspects. And this, what you are saying, Chris, is a really game changer, that there is no requirement for a new parking space. That's a big game changer. I didn't know that, so thank you for that. And what we are aiming is to make a roadmap for net zero carbon emissions in buildings. So what we're looking is for REIT and other owners of buildings that they don't know how to make that roadmap to in a net zero building. And that, of course, is going to be included with electric mobility. So we're doing that mostly in cities with low humidity, like for example, El Paso, Texas, that you can open windows. That's basically our goal, to reduce the use of air conditioning. So in cities with low humidity, like El Paso, or the ones that are in the mountain time zone, most of them are with very low humidity. So you can open windows, and we want to offer this, and it will be great to offer what you are saying now, that you don't need any more parking spaces, and that is allowed already. So thank you for that, and great to meet you.
And another one, at least in Austin, they just added transportation fees to the general impact fee. So they're having to pay for the impact on the transportation infrastructure. And that's where eCab can really come in too, because instead of having to pay the fee directly, there is a waiver where you can just hire an electric mobility company and it counts as matching funds. I don't know the exact language there, but I'm sure if you go down to One Texas Center, they could tell you. But basically, this is the future. The Harvard Business Review in 2015 said the future of electric vehicles is electric golf carts, not Tesla. And they really map it out, and it makes a lot of sense. Whenever you're driving into downtown, either San Marcos, Bastrop, or even Austin, the average speed that vehicles are traveling is 11 miles an hour. I know that downtown has a 30-mile-an-hour sign on the side of the road. Try to go 30 miles an hour between those two stop signs. I dare you. You're going to get pulled over and probably get field tested. But yeah, nobody's moving quick in a densely populated area.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. Well, so let's do this. Since we're coming to the end of our time together, how about what kind of request of collaboration, interaction, shiny objects that you're looking for, needs that might be there, that what would help eCab, like for the pioneering work you're doing, what would be valuable for you to hear from the community? Like whether it's we have a studio audience, we're spooling to LinkedIn and a couple other sites and stuff like that. Just wondering what might be valuable for you to have access to, like what type of interactions, other cities that you'd like to talk to, obviously technologies, anything. What's on your Christmas list?
Well, obviously, if anyone has any connections with city management anywhere in the Central Texas area, I would love an introduction. I'm used to meeting a lot of resistance. I'll never meet the resistance that I got in the city of Austin, but we are expanding, and that is what we're targeting: is smaller communities, and to be able to put out a few vehicles and just kind of show them how much of an impact just a few vehicles can do for their quality of life, especially for the underserved. That's something I should probably say is our competitors do the same thing that we do, except they have a free service, but then the driver turns around and wants a $20 tip. So it's not really free. And what happens with that? Our drivers are not allowed to take tips on any of these circulators because we pay them $20 an hour. They're doing really well. The reason we do that is not because I'm Ebenezer Scrooge and I don't want them to have money. It's once we make their income completely dependent upon tips, that means grandma's not getting a ride to the grocery store. And as a person who was raised by my grandparents, that means a lot to me. And I know the mobility challenges that they have.
Understood. That's a good point. That's a good point. It looked like Jorge had one more thing you wanted to add, so we'll add him back into the picture.
Sure. It would be great if you can point us out to whom to speak regarding this Inflation Reduction Act, because I downloaded it and it's really hard to understand. So if you can point us out who would be great to talk, it will be great. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, my email is posted up here, and I'm also in the Tech Ranch community, and I have no problem helping out with that because I'm still reading through the IRA myself. I mean, that does not read like a Tom Clancy novel, does it? It's a lot of words, but it's definitely in there, and that will be a stimulant for the economy, and especially right now, we really need it. But yeah, I'm happy to have that discussion.
That's perfect. Well, if there ends up being someone that we should invite onto the program as well, one of our politicians or something like that you think might be good to have, I'd certainly love to have that as well. Because that way we can actually have that be, have several different entrepreneurs from our network take advantage of the interaction. And then I think, secondly, the large group of people that don't know anything about it, it'd be interesting to kind of have access to that type of knowledge. Yeah, cool. Well, we can go forward and do that. Jorge and Chris, thank you for your insight about that. And Chris, thank you for presenting today. Any final words you'd like to make, Chris, before I take back over and say a few of the closing slides and stuff like that?
Yeah, I do, but it's not eCab related, but Kevin knows that this is real. Kevin and I had a hand in helping to burn down John Deere tractors in Georgia. Whenever we went to the John Deere Tech Accelerator, remember when we met their CTO?
Yeah. Actually, this is an interesting thing because it ties into the war conversation earlier.
Yeah. What a good thing.
One of the things that was happening was some of the Russian soldiers that were deployed into Ukraine were stealing Ukrainian farming equipment, including John Deere equipment. Take it from there, Chris, and finish the story.
So there's a Ukrainian software development company that was trying to get me to hire them. And frankly, I didn't have the budget for it. But then we meet the CTO of John Deere, and I'm thinking, hey, maybe I can do a nice thing for Ukrainians. Turns out they'd already worked with John Deere a bunch of times. Fast forward about 3 weeks, we see a news story to where a bunch of John Deeres that were stolen from the Ukraine all caught on fire at once. And what that was this Ukrainian software development company put a patch in their telematics software to whenever they powered the vehicles on, it caused the controller to overclock and completely fry out the wiring harness. I got a hold of the Ukrainian developers. It was like, was that you guys? And he said, hell yes, it was. So we made a little bit of an impact to the war effort there. It was kind of cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of Ukrainian. I mean, I hate to, I don't know. I hate, it's sad that that sort of stuff even has to happen. I would rather be just helping Russians, Ukrainians, and Uzbeks, and Mexicans, and Americans just all build companies and stuff like that. But I think that there is an importance to the resistance of saying that, like the Hemingway quote earlier, war is not okay. Stealing things from your country next door, your country, it just that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Brothers and sisters, we should just be working together. So thanks for bringing up that story. That does bring a little bit of happiness on a kind of after some sad announcements this week. So it's our
former general manager is part of the Ukrainian Foreign Legion. He is literally over there fighting the Russians right now.
Yeah, well, and all we can hope is that the war comes to an end quickly, and in the most peaceful way that it possibly can. That's my hope. So thank you for bringing that story forward. Unexpected, but yeah, Chris and I, one of the things that's important to have is to have some running buddies. And, I think I count Chris and my running buddies. So thank you for sharing your story about eCab. It's great to see all the different experimentations that you've done. It's great to see how you've leveraged guerrilla marketing techniques to solve regulation crises that were blocking innovation that needed. That's something to be proud of, because with just the ridership you've had, it's really clear that it's been popular and you figured it out. And congratulations on doing that. I know it's not been simple. So
I just make it look that way.
Exactly. Well, cool. Okay, well, so we're going to get back to just closing things up. Thanks to Chris for coming today and sharing part of his story. Part of what I want to start doing is get some of the old school tech ranchers like Chris that have gone out and done revolutionary things with their platforms and shared more about it. If you're not on our newsletter, or if you're not on our country manager list, or if you want to be on our mentor list, one of those type of lists, we will be also deploying the information form about our website, the pathway into the community site, onto this link. That is not there yet, but it will be. That whole page is going to be fixed because it's a little chaotic right now. But come to the site and let us know if there's anything that you can also. There's a form on there as well that if you want to tell us more about your venture to get involved in one of our programs, you can do that as well. But today we're coming to the end of another Venture Outfitter Weekly. Thank you for your time today. It's always an honor to be a part of a group of entrepreneurs that are driven by vision and values. Let's go change the world for the better together. Thank you all very much for being here today. Thanks to everyone for their comments, both in the chats, as well as Jorge for hopping in with your perspective as well. Next week, remember, is the EdTech All Swim. If you can, when you see the postings on social media, amplify it. Let's get other educators and different people involved so we can show off our EdTech startups and show what's happening, how we have a lot of different entrepreneurs that are moving forward there as well. Okay, see you guys next week. Cello?